Snow falls slow over a casket at the edge of a Pittsburgh cemetery. A woman in cheap boots steps forward. She lays down a single white rose. Nobody knows her name. Behind her, a woman in black fur whispers something to a tall man in a gray coat. He laughs. He glances at her once, then looks away. Far from the gravesite, deep in the Appalachian Mountains, a cabin sits alone in a meadow of snow. The roof sags. The chimney is cold. No smoke, no tracks, no sign of life. But inside, beneath a loose floorboard beside the stove, something has been waiting. For 24 years. For her. And tonight she does not know it yet. But she is coming. The snow came down slow that morning in Pittsburgh. Not the pretty kind. Not the kind that makes children press their noses against windows. This was the heavy kind. The kind that fell like it had somewhere to be, and it landed on the shoulders of mourners gathered around a cold gray casket. Hannah Brennan stood at the back. She had not been introduced to anyone, not the pastor, not the cousins who pretended not to see her, not the woman in the black fur coat who kept dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief that probably cost more than Hannah's car. That woman was Vivian Brennan, 62 years old, widow now, and the architect of every silent year that had passed between Hannah and the man in the casket. Hannah did not know that yet. She only knew that her father was dead, and that nobody at this funeral seemed to know who she was. She stepped forward when the line thinned, slow, careful, because the snow was slick beneath her cheap boots, and because her hands were trembling for a reason she could not name. She held a single white rose, picked it up that morning from a grocery store on the corner of Penn Avenue. $3.49. The cashier had smiled at her like she was nobody. That was fine. She had been nobody her whole life. She placed the rose on top of the casket, and for a moment she let her fingers rest there, on the polished wood, on the closed lid, on the man who had been her father in name only. "Goodbye," she whispered. That was all. Because what else do you say to a stranger who shared your blood? A hand touched her elbow. She flinched. "Miss Brennan," the voice said. Soft, older, tired around the edges. She turned. A man stood there in a long black coat. Mid-60s maybe. Round glasses. White mustache trimmed neat. He looked like a librarian who had wandered into the wrong room. "I'm Theodore Ainsley," he said. "Your father's attorney. I'll be reading the will tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. My office on Grant Street. You'll come." Hannah blinked. She had not expected an invitation. "They want me there?" she asked. The attorney's mouth tightened. Just for a second. "Your father wanted you there," he said. Then he handed her a card, walked back into the snow, and disappeared between the headstones. Hannah looked down at the card in her hand. Black ink on cream paper. Ainsley and Wright. Established 1968. Behind her she heard a laugh. Sharp. Female. Cruel. She turned just enough to see Vivian leaning toward a tall man in a gray coat, whispering something into his ear. He chuckled, looked over at Hannah, looked away. That tall man was Marcus. Marcus Brennan, 38 years old, senior partner at a law firm in Boston, father's eldest son. Hannah did not know that yet either. She walked back to her car, an old blue Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a stereo that only played one station no matter what button you pressed. She got in, closed the door, and sat there for a long time. She did not cry. She had not cried in years, because crying did not bring anyone back. And it certainly did not bring fathers. The radio crackled to life on its own. A church choir, Christmas hymns, something about hope. She turned it off, and she drove home. Home was a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on the edge of the city, the kind of place where the floors hummed all day from the dryers underneath, the kind of place that smelled like fabric softener and cheap coffee, The kind of place where the rent was always due and the heat was always almost broken. She climbed the stairs, stopped on the landing, and for some stupid reason, she thought about the home, St. Margaret's. That was where she had grown up. A red brick building on the outskirts of Pittsburgh. 3 floors, 40 beds, one window in every room that looked out onto a parking lot. She remembered the cafeteria, long wooden tables, plastic trays, the smell of overcooked vegetables, the way the older girls would steal the dessert from the younger ones if Director Whitaker was not watching. She remembered Christmas mornings, other children running down the hallway in pajamas, squealing, hugging the women who had come to bring them home. Cars pulling up in the parking lot, doors opening, doors closing. Hannah had always sat in the same spot, waiting. Because every Christmas, she believed. She believed that this would be the year, that someone would come, that someone would say her name, that someone would say, "I have been looking for you," that someone would say, "I am sorry it took so long." Nobody ever came, until she was 8, and a small wooden doll appeared on her bunk. No note, no name, just a doll, hand-carved, pine wood, brown hair painted on with what looked like ink, a little blue dress. Hannah had cried for an hour holding that doll. She thought it was a sign. She thought maybe her parents had finally remembered her. But Director Whitaker had walked into the room, taken the doll from her hands, and said, "It's a mistake, child. Someone left it at the wrong bunk. Don't hope. Hoping only breaks little girls." Then she left, and the doll left with her. Hannah never saw it again. She climbed the last step now, opened her apartment door, walked in, and dropped her keys on the counter. The card from the attorney was still in her coat pocket. She took it out, set it on the table, sat down, and stared at it. 10 o'clock, Grant Street. She did not sleep that night. The attorney's office was on the 8th floor of a tall building with marble floors and a security guard who asked her name twice. "Brennan," she said again. "Hannah Brennan." The guard checked his list, made a small confused sound, then nodded. "8th floor, suite 812. The elevator smelled like cologne and rain. She arrived at 5 minutes to 10. She was the only one in the waiting room. A young receptionist with a tight ponytail and a cardigan that looked too thin for the weather glanced up at her. "Your family?" the receptionist asked. "Yes," Hannah said. The receptionist's eyebrows lifted, just slightly, just enough. "You can wait here," she said. "The others arrived 20 minutes ago." The others. So they had not bothered to wait for her. That was fine. She sat down on the edge of a leather couch, set her hands in her lap, and waited. At 3 minutes past 10, the inner door opened. Theodore Ainsley peeked out. "Miss Brennan, please come in." She stood, smoothed her coat, walked through the door. The conference room was bigger than her entire apartment. A long polished table stretched down the middle, 12 leather chairs around it, floor-to-ceiling windows on one side, and 5 people already seated. 5. Vivian, in black again, black dress, black blazer, diamond on her finger that caught the light when she moved. Marcus, suit, tie, hair combed back, reading a folder. A second man Hannah had not met, tall like Marcus, same square jaw, but softer, younger, maybe early 30s. He was looking at his phone. That was Garrett. Garrett Brennan, 35 years old, the middle son. 2 other lawyers in dark suits sat across from them, notepads ready. Nobody stood when Hannah walked in. Nobody offered her a chair. She walked to the end of the table, pulled out the seat farthest from everyone, and sat. Vivian glanced at her. Just once. The corner of her mouth turned upward. Almost a smile. Not quite. "Shall we begin?" Theodore Ainsley said. He cleared his throat, opened a folder, and began to read. Hannah did not catch most of it. There were percentages and account numbers and property addresses, and the word bequeath used so many times that it stopped sounding like a real word. But she caught the important parts. The lakefront estate in Boston, to Marcus, the investment portfolio, $3.2 million, split between Marcus and Garrett. The construction company in Providence, to Marcus, the art collection, to Vivian. The cars, the boats, the vacation home in Florida, Marcus, Garrett, Vivian, Marcus. She listened. She did not look up. She felt her hands grow cold in her lap. Because of course this was happening. Because what did she expect? What in God's name had she expected? That her father, a man who had not spoken to her in 23 years, would leave her something, anything. She felt stupid for coming, for dressing up, for brushing her hair this morning like it mattered. Then Theodore Ainsley turned a page. And finally, he said, "To my daughter, Hannah Margaret Brennan." The room went quiet. Marcus stopped reading his folder. Garrett looked up from his phone. Vivian's diamond stopped catching the light. Theodore continued, "To my daughter, Hannah Margaret Brennan. I leave the property at Route 12, Cedar Creek, West Virginia, approximately 114 acres of land, one residential structure, all contents within." He stopped. He waited. Marcus laughed. It was the worst sound Hannah had ever heard. Sharp, short. The laugh of a man who could not believe his luck. "The cabin," Marcus said. "He gave her the cabin." He turned to Vivian. "Mother, he gave the orphan the dump." Vivian smiled, this time fully. Garrett said nothing, but Garrett looked down at the table, and Hannah saw his hand close into a fist. She did not know why. She did not know what it meant. Theodore Ainsley cleared his throat again. "There is also a small cash bequest, $5,000, to assist with travel and initial expenses for the property transition." "5,000, Marcus repeated. "Generous." He smirked. Hannah said nothing, because there was nothing to say. She had grown up with nothing, and now she had inherited nothing. The cycle was clean, tidy, almost poetic. The meeting ended. Papers were signed. Hannah signed where they told her to sign. Marcus and Vivian stood, gathered their coats, walked out without looking at her. Garrett lingered. For a second, he glanced at her, his mouth open, then closed. He left. Hannah remained. The two outside lawyers packed up. Theodore Ainsley dismissed his assistants, and then it was just him and her and the long polished table. "Miss Brennan," he said. He sat down beside her. "Your father left explicit instructions. There is one more thing, something he wanted only you to receive, privately." He reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope, cream-colored, sealed with red wax. The wax had been pressed with a small symbol, a flame, a single curling flame. He placed it in her hand. "He gave me this 6 years ago," Theodore said. "He told me to give it to you alone, after his death, after the will was read, and only if you were the one who came." Hannah stared at it. "What is it?" she asked. "I have no idea," Theodore said. "I never opened it." He stood, then he paused. "He spoke about you," he said. "Often." Hannah looked up. "He did more than you would believe." He walked to the door, stopped, turned. "I am very sorry it took this long for you to receive what was yours, Miss Brennan. And there is something else. A second envelope. Your father instructed me to mail it to you separately, 3 weeks after his death, to the address on the property deed. You should expect it once you arrive at the cabin." He nodded once, and then he left. Hannah sat alone in the long polished room. The cream envelope rested in her palm. She did not open it there. She did not trust herself to. She walked out of the building, got in her car, drove 3 blocks, pulled over, killed the engine, and only then did she break the wax. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. The handwriting was shaky. The pen had pressed too hard in places, like the writer had been afraid of running out of time. It said this: Hannah, do not sell the cabin. Do not let them buy it from you. Do not believe what they tell you about it. I have waited for you to come for 24 years. Please come. Yours always, Dad. She read it once, then again, then a third time. Then she pressed the paper to her mouth. And for the first time since she was a child sitting in St. Margaret's cafeteria, for the first time in 17 years, Hannah Brennan cried. The cabin was in West Virginia. She left 2 mornings later. She did not tell anyone because there was no one to tell. She packed a duffel bag, 3 sweaters, 2 pairs of jeans, a coat, a small box of toiletries, a flashlight, a box of granola bars, and the cream envelope. She locked her apartment, slid the key under the laundromat owner's door with a note that said she would be back in a week. Maybe 2, she did not know. Then she drove, south on I-79, then southeast on Route 12. The interstate gave way to 2-lane roads. The 2-lane roads gave way to 1-lane roads. The 1-lane roads gave way to gravel. The world got quieter. The radio crackled, then died. Her phone lost signal somewhere around mile marker 47. She did not turn around, because somehow she could not. The Appalachian Mountains rose up around her like old gray giants who had been there since the world was young. Trees crowded the road. Bare branches scratched at the gray sky. Patches of old snow clung to the shaded shoulders. Smoke rose from distant chimneys. She had never been this far from a city. It felt like crossing a border. Into what? She did not know. By mid-afternoon, the snow started, soft at first, then heavy, then merciless. The windshield wipers worked overtime. She slowed the car to 30, then 20, then 15. The road curved. A weathered sign appeared through the white. Welcome to Cedar Creek, population 408. She passed a small church, steeple white, cross gray. She passed a row of houses with smoke drifting from their chimneys. She passed an old man shoveling his porch who paused and watched her car go by. She passed a general store. The sign over the door said, Hoyts in fading red letters. She pulled into the parking lot. She needed gas. She needed directions. She needed warmth. She got out of the car, wrapped her coat tighter, and pushed open the door. A brass bell jingled overhead. Warmth hit her face. The store smelled like coffee, wood smoke, cinnamon, and something else, something old, something familiar in a way that made no sense. Behind the counter sat an old man, 70-something, white beard, plaid flannel, reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead, a newspaper folded across his knee. He looked up. He froze, just for a heartbeat, just long enough for her to notice. Then he set the newspaper down, very slowly, like a man who had been waiting a long time and wanted to make sure he did not move too fast. You're Everett Brennan's girl, he said. It was not a question. Hannah stopped in the middle of the store, her hand still on the door handle. How, she said. How do you know that, she said. The old man's eyes did not leave her face. Because you have his nose, he said, and because nobody else has come up this road in 3 weeks. She did not know what to say, so she said the only thing she could think of. I'm Hannah. I know, he said. He stood up, walked around the counter, held out his hand. Walter Hoyt, lived in this town all my life, knew your father longer than I knew my own brothers. She shook his hand. His grip was warm, calloused, steady. You knew him? She asked. Yes. How well Walter Hoyt smiled, sad and slow. Better than most, not as well as I should have. He let go of her hand, walked to the coffee pot behind the counter, poured 2 cups, slid one across to her. Sit, he said. You look cold. She sat. The stool was old, wooden. It creaked. She drank the coffee. It was strong. It was good. It was the first warm thing she had felt all day. He came here, Walter said. My father. Every month. She set the cup down. What, every month? Walter said again. 20 years, maybe 21. He'd drive up the first weekend, stay 2 nights, drive back Sunday afternoon. Never missed. Hannah stared at him. That's not possible. It happened. He didn't even know I existed. Walter's mouth tightened. Hannah Margaret Brennan, born June 14th, spent the first 18 years of her life at St. Margaret's Home for Children, worked her way through community college on a partial scholarship, took a job at a coffee shop on Penn Avenue when she turned 21, got promoted to assistant manager last spring. Hannah's mouth went dry. How, she said. How do you know all of that, she said. Because he told me, Walter said. Every visit. He sat right where you're sitting, right on that stool, and he talked about you for hours. Her hands began to shake. She set the cup down before she dropped it. That doesn't make sense, she said. I know. He never came for me. I know that too. He never wrote, never called, never sent a birthday card. Walter was quiet. Then he said something very softly. Are you sure about that, Hannah? She stared at him. What do you mean? I mean, Walter said. Are you sure he never wrote to you? The question hung in the warm, coffee-smelling air. She thought about something she had not thought about in years. A small wooden doll on her bunk when she was 8. A doll director Whitaker had taken away. A doll she had never seen again. She thought about birthdays, about the years she had checked the mailbox at the home like a fool, about the years she had turned 16 and waited all day by the front door because something in her had whispered, today, today, today. Nothing had come. But what if? What if? She shook her head hard. Stop, she said. Hannah. No, stop. I don't want to hear it. All right. Just tell me how to get to the cabin. Walter studied her face for a long moment. Then he reached under the counter, pulled out a folded paper map, spread it across the wood. His finger traced a route, up the main road, past the church, right at the fork, 3 miles up the mountain, left onto an old logging road, 2 more miles, then a clearing. Cabin sits at the edge of the clearing, he said. You'll know it when you see it. She nodded. She stood up. She pulled some bills out of her wallet to pay for the coffee. Walter waved her off. On the house. I can pay. You can, but you won't. She put the money away. She walked to the door. She stopped. She turned. Mr. Hoyt? Yes. Why did he come? Walter Hoyt looked at her. His eyes were very tired. His eyes were very kind. That, he said, is something you'll have to find out for yourself. She nodded, and she pushed the door open. The brass bell jingled, and she walked back out into the snow. The road up the mountain was worse than she expected. The Honda groaned, the tires slipped, the trees pressed in on both sides like silent witnesses. She kept driving. She had to, because she could not turn around now. The light began to fade. The afternoon thinned. The shadows grew long. She passed no other cars, no other houses, no other signs of life. Just trees and snow and the occasional flicker of a deer disappearing between the trunks. She found the logging road. She turned. She drove another 2 miles. And then, the clearing. It opened up in front of her like something out of a dream she had forgotten she had. A meadow. snow-covered, ringed by tall pines, a frozen creek running along the far edge, and at the center, at the heart of it, the cabin. It was small. It was older than anything had a right to be. The roof sagged in the middle. The porch leaned to one side. The chimney was made of river stones piled high and held together by mortar that had seen 100 winters. But it was not abandoned. Not exactly. It was waiting. She put the car in park. She killed the engine. For a long moment, she did not move. Because the silence here was a kind of silence she had never heard before. Not the silence of an empty apartment. Not the silence of a city at 3 in the morning. This was older, deeper. The silence of a place that had been quiet for so long it had learned how to listen. She opened her door. She stepped out. The snow crunched beneath her boots. She walked to the porch. The steps groaned when she climbed them. She fished in her coat pocket for the brass key Theodore Ainsley had given her. Found it, slipped it into the lock. The lock resisted. She wiggled the key. It turned. The door opened. A wave of cold, stale air greeted her. Cedar wood, old paper, dust, time. She stepped inside. She fumbled for her flashlight, switched it on, swept the beam around. The room was small. A stone fireplace dominated the far wall. A leather chair sat in front of it. A round wooden table stood under a window. A small kitchen branched off to the right. A narrow staircase climbed to a loft on the left. Everything was covered in dust, but nothing was broken. Nothing was vandalized. It was as if someone had walked out one day, closed the door, and expected to come right back. Her flashlight beam landed on the mantel above the fireplace. A photograph. She walked over. She picked it up. She wiped the dust away with her sleeve. 2 people stood in front of the cabin. A man in his 30s, smiling, wide, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. And beside him, an elderly woman, maybe in her 70s. White hair pulled back in a bun, a flowered apron over a dark dress, her hand resting on his arm. The man was her father. She had only seen one photograph of him in her entire life, from a newspaper clipping, from an article about a bridge he had engineered in Ohio. But she knew his face, she knew his eyes, because they were her own. She turned the photograph over, faded ink, careful handwriting. Keep the fire burning, EB 1998. EB. She frowned. The woman in the photograph was not her father. The signature was not her father's. EB, who was EB? She stared at the writing. She did not know. She set the photograph back on the mantel. She turned in a slow circle. The cabin felt strange. Not haunted, not exactly, but not empty either. It felt like a room where someone had just stopped speaking, like a song that had been paused mid-note. Then she heard a knock. She froze. Her heart slammed into her ribs. A second knock, slow, polite, 3 taps. She moved toward the door. She placed her hand on the latch. She hesitated because she was alone, on a mountain, in a town where nobody knew her, at a cabin nobody had visited in years, and someone was knocking. She took a breath. She opened the door. An old woman stood on the porch, 68 maybe, tall, sturdy, gray hair tucked under a knit hat, a blue wool coat buttoned all the way up, round cheeks, soft eyes, a faint smell of cinnamon and bread dough drifting off her like she had stepped out of a kitchen and forgotten to leave it behind. She held a basket, cloth-covered, steam rising from beneath the cloth. "Oh, good," the old woman said. "You're here. I was hoping I would catch you before the snow set in proper." Hannah opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Who?" she said. "Margaret," the old woman said. "Margaret Whitfield. I live a mile down the ridge. Walter Hoyt called me from the store, said you'd be coming up. I thought you might be hungry. She held out the basket. Hannah took it without thinking. The cloth was warm. The bread inside was warm. The whole basket was warm in a way that traveled up Hannah's arms and into her chest like sunlight. Hannah said. She did not know what to say, so she said, "Thank you." Margaret smiled. Her smile was a small, soft thing. It reminded Hannah of grandmothers she had never had. "May I come in?" Margaret said. "Just for a moment. I won't keep you, but the wind is sharp tonight." "Yes," Hannah said. "Of course." Margaret stepped inside. She closed the door behind her. Quiet, mannered, the kind of woman who had been taught long ago how to enter a home gently. She looked around. She did not look surprised. She looked, almost, as if she had been here before. "He kept it well," Margaret said softly, "considering. You knew my father. I knew your father." "How well?" "Well enough." Margaret turned slowly. Her eyes traveled around the cabin, lingering on the mantel, on the leather chair, on the photograph Hannah had set back down. Then her eyes landed on Hannah's hand. She went still. "That ring," she said. Hannah looked down. She had forgotten. A small silver ring rested on her right hand. She had been wearing it since the funeral. Theodore Ainsley had given it to her in a small velvet box, along with the sealed letter. He had said only, "It was your father's wish that you have this." She had not thought much of it. It was a simple band, silver, a little tarnished, two letters engraved on the inside, E.B. She held her hand out toward Margaret now. Margaret took her fingers very carefully, as if Hannah's hand were made of porcelain. She studied the ring, her eyes filled with something Hannah could not name. "Eleanor Brennan," Margaret whispered. "Who?" Hannah said. "Your great-grandmother." Margaret looked up at her. Her eyes were wet. "She wore this ring her whole life," Margaret said. "And then your grandmother wore it. And then your father wore it on a chain around his neck. Every single day. For 40 years. Hannah could not breathe. "How do you know that?" she whispered. Margaret let go of her hand. She smiled, sad and full, "Because I was sitting beside her the day she gave it to him. Eleanor, in this very cabin. 1973. I was just a girl then. 12 years old, visiting my aunt up the ridge. Eleanor invited the whole valley to her 75th birthday, and she pressed this ring into your father's palm. He was 8. Hannah's knees felt strange. "She told him this." Margaret's voice grew steady. "She told him, 'Keep the fire burning, Everett, until you can give it to someone who will.'" Hannah sat down on the edge of the leather chair. She had to, because the room had begun to tilt, because her father, a man who had lived in her mind for 24 years as a ghost, a blur, a shape, had been a small boy in this cabin once, with a ring pressed into his hand, with a promise made over a birthday cake, with a great-grandmother who had told him to keep the fire burning. And he did, Margaret said quietly. He kept it for 52 years, and now he has passed it to you. Hannah looked down at the silver band on her finger. The light from the flashlight caught the engraving. E.B. Eleanor Brennan. Margaret stepped closer. She placed a warm hand on Hannah's shoulder, the first warm hand to touch her in years. "Welcome home, child," she said. Hannah did not cry. She had cried enough this week. But her eyes burned, and her chest ached in a way it had not ached since she was small, since she had waited for something that never came. Margaret moved to the fireplace. She knelt. She arranged a few of the old dry logs that lay in the iron grate. "You'll need this lit before nightfall," she said. "There's matches in the tin on the mantel, and there's plenty more wood in the lean-to out back. Your father always kept it stocked. Said you never knew when someone might need a place to come in from the cold." Hannah watched her. She watched this stranger move through her father's cabin as if she had moved through it 100 times before, as if she belonged here, as if she had been waiting for Hannah, for this exact moment, for 24 years. Margaret, Hannah said, why did he leave it to me? Margaret paused. She turned, still kneeling, still holding a piece of kindling in her hand. I think, she said slowly, I think he left it to you because you are the only one who would understand what it means. What does it mean? Margaret smiled, the smile of a woman who had carried a secret for a very long time and was finally setting it down. That, she said, is something this cabin will teach you, if you let it. She struck a match. The flame caught. She held it to the kindling. The kindling caught. The logs caught. Within a minute, the fireplace was alive, orange and gold and crackling, throwing warmth into the cold, dusty room. The first fire to burn in this hearth in 3 years. Margaret stood up. She brushed off her skirt. She walked to the door. She paused on the threshold. There is more here than you can see in one night, Hannah Brennan, she said. Take it slow. The cabin has waited a long time. It can wait a few more days. She opened the door. The cold air rushed in. Then she stopped, turned, one last time. And Hannah, yes, there is a loose board in the kitchen floor, right beside the stove. Your father always meant to fix it. I would not fix it if I were you. Not until you have looked beneath it. Hannah's heart stopped. Margaret smiled gently. Then she walked out into the snow. The door swung closed behind her, and Hannah stood alone in her father's cabin, with a fire burning at her back, and a silver ring on her finger that had belonged to a woman she had never met, and a photograph on the mantle of a man who had spent 20 years driving to a town she had never heard of, to talk about her, to a store owner she had only just met. She walked slowly to the kitchen. The flashlight in her hand trembled. She knelt beside the stove. She set the flashlight down on the floor. The beam pointed straight at the floorboards. And there, right there, just like Margaret had said, one floorboard sat slightly higher than the rest. A small iron ring was embedded in the wood. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the iron. It was cold. It was waiting. She did not pull it yet. She just looked at it. Because she knew, somewhere in her bones, that whatever was under this floor, whatever her father had hidden here, was going to change everything she thought she knew about her father, about her family, about herself. The fire crackled behind her. The wind pressed against the windows. The snow fell outside in slow, heavy curtains. And Hannah Brennan, 24 years old, knelt on a cold kitchen floor in the Appalachian Mountains. She wrapped her fingers around the iron ring. She closed her eyes. She took a breath, and she pulled. The board lifted with a long, low groan, like the cabin itself was waking up. Cold air rushed up from below, the kind of cold that did not come from outside, the kind of cold that came from a place that had been sealed for a very long time. Hannah sat back on her heels. She stared down. A square hole, maybe 3 feet across. Wooden steps descending into the dark. She did not move, because every instinct she had as a 24-year-old woman alone in a cabin on a mountain in the middle of a snowstorm was telling her one simple thing: do not go down there. But there was another voice too, a quieter one, a voice that sounded like the 8-year-old girl who had once held a wooden doll for 1 hour. That voice said something different. That voice said, he left this for you. He waited 24 years. So she went down, slow, the flashlight beam shaking in her hand, each step creaking under her weight like the wood was remembering footsteps it had not held in years. The air grew colder. The smell changed. Cedar wood, old paper, stone, ink, time, so much time. At the bottom, her boots hit packed dirt. She raised the flashlight. She gasped. Because it was not a cellar. It was a library, a long, narrow room, stone walls, wooden shelves built from floor to ceiling, and on those shelves, books. No, not books. Journals, hundreds of them, maybe more. Leather covers, cloth covers, some thin, some thick, some bound with twine, some bound with ribbon, stacked, lined, organized. A wooden desk stood in the center of the room, a single brass lamp on the desk, a wooden chair behind it, and on the desk, just one journal, open, waiting. Hannah walked to it. She did not breathe. She set her flashlight down on the desk so the beam pointed at the open page. The handwriting was her father's. She knew it from the cream-colored letters sealed with wax, the same careful slant, the same patient ink. The first line read, "If you are reading this, Hannah, then you have found what your father has spent his life protecting." Her hand shot to her mouth. She read it again and again. Because. She sat down in the wooden chair. She did not remember doing it. The chair was solid beneath her, real. The desk was real. The journal was real. She turned the page. The next entry was dated January 8th, 1998. My daughter is 6 years old today. She started first grade in September. The director of the home wrote me a letter to confirm her enrollment. She did not have to. I paid her for that information. I will keep paying for as long as it takes, because Vivian will not let me near, and because I am not strong enough yet to fight her. But one day I will be. One day I will come for her. Until then, I write. Hannah read that twice. She read it 3 times. Then she turned the page. January 8th, 1999. My daughter is 7. Her teacher says she is quiet, bright. She prefers books to other children. She likes the color yellow. She has lost 2 front teeth. The director of the home sent a photograph in exchange for a donation to the roof fund. I have it in front of me now. She is smiling. Not a full smile, a careful one. The kind a child learns when she is not sure she is allowed to be happy. Hannah put her hand over her mouth. She could not stop reading. She did not want to stop reading. She turned the page, then another, then another. Each year, another entry. Each entry, the date of her birthday. Hannah is 10. She has learned to ride a bicycle. The director said she fell off 6 times before she got it. Hannah is 12. She placed second in the spelling bee at her school. The word she missed was bequest. Hannah is 15. She started working weekends at a diner. She sends some of her paycheck back to the home to help with the younger children. Hannah is 18. She was accepted into Allegheny Community College. She is studying English. She wants to be a teacher. Hannah is 20. She has changed her major to social work. The director said it is because of the children she helped at the home, the ones who came after her, the ones who reminded her of herself. Hannah is 23. She has been promoted to assistant manager at the coffee shop. She works the morning shift. She gives free pastries to the man who sits outside on Tuesdays. She stopped reading. She pressed her face into her hands. Because he had known. He had known all of it, every single year, every detail. And she had thought. She had thought he forgot her. She had built her entire life on the foundation that her father had forgotten her. That foundation was shifting beneath her feet right now, in a stone room, under a cabin, in the mountains, in the middle of the night. She lifted her head. She wiped her face with her sleeve. She kept reading. She could not help herself, because there were dozens more pages, hundreds more. She read until the flashlight battery began to dim. She read until her eyes burned. She read until the cold from the stone floor crept through her jeans and into her bones. And finally, when she could read no more, she stood up. She walked to the shelves. She let her hand drift along the spines of the journals. Dozens of them. Each one labeled with a single year. The earliest was 1992, the year she was born. She had not been forgotten, not for one day, not for 1 hour. Her father had filled an entire room with proof. She did not sleep that night. She sat in the leather chair upstairs, wrapped in a wool blanket, the fire crackling beside her, the photograph on the mantel staring back at her. She thought about a small wooden doll she had not allowed herself to think about in 17 years. She closed her eyes. She remembered something her father had written in one of the earliest journals. I left a wooden doll for her at the home on her 8th birthday. I carved it myself over 6 months. I painted it in the garage so Vivian would not see. I drove it there in the trunk of my car. I gave it to the director with a $100 bill folded inside the box. I told her it was from her father. Hannah opened her eyes. The fire blurred in front of her. Because the director had taken that doll. She had taken it, and she had told an 8-year-old girl that hope only broke little girls. Hannah did not know if the director had kept the doll or thrown it away or sold it or burned it. She did not want to know. She only knew this. Her father had carved her a doll in a garage, so his wife would not see, and his wife had still won. For 16 years, his wife had still won. Morning came pale and silver. The snow had stopped sometime in the night. She made coffee on the cast iron stove. The grounds were stale, but she did not care. She drank it black. Standing by the window, watching the light change over the meadow, she thought about going home. She did not know what home was anymore. A laundromat in Pittsburgh, a studio apartment with a broken heater, a coffee shop where her boss called her sweetheart in a way that made her skin crawl. That was not home. This was not home either. Not yet. But it was the closest thing she had ever stood inside of. She turned from the window. She went back down to the library. She read for the rest of the morning. She read about a man who had loved his daughter from across a state line, who had paid the director of a home and teachers and even a high school guidance counselor to learn the smallest details of her life. Who had been afraid? Who had been weak? Who had known he was weak? Who had hated himself for it? She read his confessions. She read his apologies. She read his promises to do better. She read the promises he had never kept. And around noon, she found a small wooden cabinet she had not noticed the night before. It stood against the far wall. Dark oak, polished smooth. It was locked. Hannah searched for half an hour before she found the key. In a tin labeled personal, tucked inside an old desk drawer. The key was small. The lock was simple. The cabinet opened. Inside, one wooden box, carved by hand, heavy. On the lid, carved deep into the wood, 2 words, Hannah Margaret. She lowered herself onto the cold floor. She lifted the box out. She set it in her lap. Her hands were shaking again. She opened it. Inside, letters, many of them, stacked, tied with faded blue ribbon, yellowing at the edges, some thick, some thin. She untied the ribbon. She took the top envelope in her hand. The handwriting was her father's. The address on the front was the home. The date was 22 years ago. It had never been opened, because it had never been delivered. She slid her finger under the flap. She broke the seal. She unfolded the paper. It said this: Dear Hannah, today you are 2 years old. I came to the home this morning. I parked across the street. I sat in my car for 3 hours. I watched the front window. I saw you twice. Once you walked past with a woman I did not recognize. The second time you were carrying a stuffed rabbit. You looked at the window. You did not see me. I almost got out. I almost crossed the street. But I did not. Because I am a coward. And because Vivian has threatened to take everything from me. And because I do not yet know how to fight her. But I am writing this so that one day, when I am stronger, when I have found a way, you will know that I loved you on this day and on every day. I love you, Dad. Hannah set the letter down. She picked up the next one. Dear Hannah, today you are 3. The next. Dear Hannah, today is your first day of kindergarten. The director sent me a photograph. You are wearing a yellow dress. You are holding a paper lunchbox. The next. Dear Hannah, today you are 7. I tried to come. I drove all the way to Pittsburgh. I sat in the parking lot. I almost walked in. But Vivian called me on the car phone. She knew. She always knew. She said, if you walk into that building, Everett, I will take your sons. I will tell everyone in Boston that you abandoned your wife and tried to kidnap a child from a state home. You will lose everything. Hannah closed her eyes. She opened them. She kept reading. The next. Dear Hannah, today you are 8. I carved you a doll. I hope the director gives it to you. I told her to. I paid her to. But I do not trust her. The next. Dear Hannah, today you are 9. I do not know if you got the doll. I do not know anything anymore. Vivian has hired a lawyer. She is filing papers. She is trying to make sure I never see you. She is winning. She always wins. I am writing to you because writing is the only thing she cannot take from me. The next. Dear Hannah, today you are 16. I drove past your school. I parked across the street. You were laughing with another girl. Your hair was longer than I expected. You looked happy. For one moment, you looked happy. And I almost stopped. God knows I almost stopped. But I promised myself a long time ago that I would not make your life harder than it already is. So I drove away. And I cried. I am crying now. I am 61 years old, and I am sitting in my car at a rest stop in Ohio, and I am crying because my daughter is 16 years old, and I have never said her name to her face. Hannah set the letters down. She could not see them anymore. The page was blurred. She wiped her eyes. She put her hands flat on the cold stone floor. She tried to breathe. She tried. She tried. A voice in her head said something cruel. The voice said, he was weak. He was a coward. He chose to write letters instead of being a father. Another voice, softer, said, he was alone. He was afraid. He was up against someone who had threatened to destroy his children, and he loved you the only way he knew how. She did not know which voice was right. Maybe they both were. Maybe that was what being human meant. She picked up the letters again. She kept reading. And somewhere near the bottom of the stack, beneath a layer of older envelopes, she found a folder. Manila, plain, labeled in her father's hand. Private correspondence. She opened it. The folder was thick. Court documents, legal letters, certified mail receipts, records of 7 different custody petitions filed over 12 years. Each one denied. Each one with the same kind of dry official language. Petitioner does not demonstrate sufficient grounds for visitation. Hannah did not know much about court documents, but she had worked at a coffee shop for 3 years. She knew when something did not add up, because the petitions had been filed by a man who built bridges, who designed structures that held up traffic loads of 200 tons, who had run a successful engineering firm for 20 years, who had a clean record, who paid his taxes, who attended church on Sundays. But 7 different courts had ruled against him. 7. That was not a coincidence. That was a pattern. Someone with influence had been working against him. Someone with connections. Hannah turned the page. The next document, a letter from a private investigator, dated 1996. It had been sent to her father. Mr. Brennan, as requested, I have looked into the matter of your wife's family connections within the legal system. I can confirm that Mrs. Vivian Brennan's late stepfather served for many years as a senior court clerk. Her brother holds a judicial position. Several of her stepfather's longtime colleagues now hold positions that could be relevant to your case. I would advise that any custody action filed in her home region is unlikely to be ruled in your favor. I would advise that you consider filing elsewhere. Even then, I would advise caution. Her family's reach is considerable. Hannah set the letter down. She felt sick. She read another letter, this one from a different investigator, 5 years later. Mr. Brennan, per your request, I have looked into the matter of mail sent to St. Margaret's Home for Children in Pittsburgh. I can confirm that the director of the home, Agnes Whitaker, has received monthly payments from a trust account registered to Mrs. Vivian Brennan since 1993. The records I obtained suggest that these payments have been linked to the disposal of correspondence sent to your daughter, Hannah Margaret Brennan. Hannah dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor. She stood up. She walked to the wall. She put her forehead against the cold stone. Because Agnes Whitaker. The woman who had told her hope only broke little girls. The woman who had taken her wooden doll. The woman who had stood in front of her every morning for 18 years. That woman had been paid to make sure Hannah believed she was forgotten, paid to take the letters, paid to take the doll, paid to take a little girl's hope away, year after year. That was the price of her entire childhood. A monthly check. She slid down the wall. She sat on the floor. She held her knees. She did not cry. She had passed crying. She had passed crying somewhere around the third letter. Now she only felt one thing, a small cold rage, slow, steady, like a fire just starting to catch. She climbed the stairs back into the cabin. The afternoon light was thin and gray. The fire had burned down to embers. She stood in the middle of the room and she did not know what to do with her body. She wanted to throw something. She wanted to scream. She wanted to drive back to Pittsburgh and find Agnes Whitaker and ask her why. Why did you take the doll? Why did you take the letters? Why did you tell me hope breaks little girls? But that would not change anything, because the letters had been taken. The doll had been taken. The years had been taken. And no amount of asking why would give them back. She walked to the window. She looked out at the snow. Then she heard tires on gravel. 2 cars coming up the logging road. Black, polished, expensive. Her stomach dropped. She did not need to see the license plates to know. She knew. Marcus, Garrett. They had come. She stepped out onto the porch. She did not put on her coat. She wanted them to see that she was not afraid, even though she was. Marcus got out of this first car. Polished shoes, long black overcoat. His face was the same face from the will reading. The same dismissive smirk. The same flat eyes. Garrett got out of the second car. Slower. Hands in his pockets. He did not look at her at first. Hannah, Marcus said. Marcus, you're a hard woman to find. I'm exactly where the will said I would be. He smiled, without warmth. True. He walked closer. Garrett followed, 3 paces behind. Marcus stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked up at her. He did not climb. We need to talk. About what? About this place. What about it? We want to buy it. She did not respond. 80,000, Marcus said. Cash today. She raised her eyebrows. For 114 acres of mountain land and a 100-year-old cabin. That's right. Why? What do you mean why? I mean why. The cabin is worthless. You said so yourself. Sentimental reasons. Try again. Marcus smiled. This time he did climb the steps. He stopped on the porch, 3 feet from her. He smelled like cologne and expensive leather. Listen, he said. I am trying to be generous here. Are you? Yes. Why? Because we're family, Hannah. She laughed, short, sharp. It surprised her. We're not family, Marcus. His jaw tightened. Hannah, we met for the first time 3 days ago at a will reading where you called me the orphan and laughed about a dump. Hannah, you're not my family. 85,000, he said. No. 90. No. 100. She tilted her head. What's in this cabin, Marcus? His face did not change, but something behind his eyes did. A flicker, fast, almost invisible. But there. Nothing, he said. Just a cabin. Then why are you offering me $100,000 for it? Because I am trying to be kind to my sister. Half-sister. Hannah. You don't know me, Marcus. You don't know my middle name. You don't know my birthday. You don't know what I do for a living. Hannah Margaret. June 14th. You work at a coffee shop in Pittsburgh. That stopped her, just for a moment. Because. How did he know? She held herself very still. Mother told me, he said. Of course she did. Sell me the cabin, Hannah. No. Don't be stupid. I'm not. You don't even know what you have. Then tell me. He did not answer. She nodded slowly. That's what I thought. She turned to go back inside. Hannah. She paused. His voice had changed, lower, tight. Don't make me come back here, he said. She looked at him over her shoulder. She did not smile. But something inside her steadied. Something that had been wobbling for 3 days. Settled. Then don't come back, she said. She walked inside. She closed the door. She locked it. She heard car doors slam. She heard engines start. She heard tires on gravel. Then silence. The cabin held her. The fire crackled in the hearth. The photograph on the mantel. Her father. Her great-grandmother. The two of them smiling at her across decades. Hannah let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. She went to bed early. She woke up at 3 in the morning, not because of a sound, because of a thought she could not unthink. Garrett. She had been so focused on Marcus. She had barely looked at Garrett, but Garrett had stood 3 paces back, hands in pockets, eyes on the porch boards. And just before he had turned to leave, he had looked up at her, just for a second, and his eyes had not been cold. His eyes had been asking. Asking what? She did not know, but she could not sleep now. She got up, made tea, wrapped herself in the blanket, sat by the fire. She looked at the photograph on the mantel. She thought about her father. She thought about Vivian. She thought about the locked cabinet that had held her name. And then she remembered something, a drawer in the desk downstairs, a drawer she had not opened. She had assumed it was empty, or stuck, or unimportant. But what if? She got up, she lit a candle, she walked down the steps, she went to the desk. She knelt. She tugged at the drawer. It resisted. She tugged harder. It opened. Inside, one thing, a small leather notebook, brown, thinner than the journals on the shelves. She picked it up. She opened the cover. The first page was dated. October, 3 years ago. 3 years before her father had died. The handwriting was her father's, but it was shakier, looser, like a man writing quickly. She read, I am dying. The doctor told me yesterday. 6 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky. I am not going to be lucky. I have not been lucky a day in my life. But I am writing this because I have decided. I have decided to do one last thing, something I should have done 30 years ago. I am going to find a way to bring her here. I do not know how yet, but I will find a way. I have to, because before I die, she has to know. Hannah turned the page. Vivian does not know I am sick. I am not going to tell her, because if she knows, she will make moves to keep Hannah away from this place forever. The estate, the cabin, all of it. She will lock her out, the way she locked her out of my life. I have to be quiet, careful. I have to leave breadcrumbs only Hannah can follow. Another page. Vivian came into my study tonight. She was crying. I have not seen her cry in 20 years. I do not know why she was crying. I asked. She said, Everett, I have been so afraid for so long, she said. My first husband used to hurt me, she said. I have been so afraid for so long that I would lose everything again. I held her. I did not say anything. Because what do you say to a woman who has destroyed your daughter's life because she could not stop being afraid? Hannah stopped. She read that paragraph again. Vivian. Vivian had a first husband. Vivian had been hurt. Vivian had spent her whole life afraid. Hannah did not know what to do with that. Because. Because she did not want to feel sorry for Vivian. She did not want to. She did not want her rage to be complicated. Rage was easier when it was simple. She turned the page. I do not forgive her. I want to be clear. I do not forgive her for what she did to Hannah. But I understand her a little. And I think Hannah may be the only person in this world strong enough to do what I cannot. Because Hannah grew up with nothing. And Vivian grew up with too much pain. And both of them, have something to teach the other if they are ever brave enough to learn it. Hannah closed the notebook. She held it against her chest. Because. Because her father had not just left her a cabin. He had not just left her letters. He had left her a question. Could she be the one to break the cycle? Could that girl, that woman, be the one to forgive? She did not know. She did not have to know yet. She set the notebook on the desk. She climbed the stairs. She walked back to the fire. She watched the flames. She thought about all the letters in the box. She thought about the journals on the shelves. She thought about Vivian crying in her father's study. She thought about Marcus offering her $100,000. She thought about Garrett standing 3 paces back. She did not know what was going to happen tomorrow, or next week, or next year. But she knew one thing. She was not going to sell the cabin. 3 days passed. She read. She slept. She walked through the snow. She tended the fire. Margaret came every morning with fresh bread. They sat by the hearth. They drank tea. Margaret did not push for stories. She just sat. Walter came twice. He brought a sack of groceries the first time. He brought a stack of firewood the second. The town was watching her. Quietly. Carefully. Like they had been told to. By a man who had been visiting them every month for 20 years. She began to understand something. She was not alone here. Even though she had arrived alone, she was not alone. On the 4th evening, she was washing a coffee cup at the kitchen sink when she heard it. Footsteps on the porch. Light. Hesitant. A long pause. Then a small knock. 3 quiet taps. Hannah dried her hands on a dish towel. She walked to the door. She opened it. A young woman stood there. 19, maybe 20. Thin, pale, snow in her hair, a faded canvas backpack hanging off one shoulder, a coat that was too thin for the mountains. Her lips were blue. Her hands were red. She did not meet Hannah's eyes. I'm sorry, the young woman said. Her voice was small. I was told by someone in the town, by Mr. Hoyt. He said that if a person needed somewhere, they could come here. He said this is the kind of place where they could come. Hannah stood very still because somewhere in her father's journals, in an entry written 20 years ago, she had read these exact words. One day someone will come to the door, a stranger, cold, afraid, hungry, and whoever is in this cabin will have a choice, to let them in or to turn them away. There will only ever be one right answer. Hannah looked at the young woman on her porch, at the snow in her hair, at the trembling lips. She thought about a small girl who had once been told that hope only broke little girls. She thought about the photograph on the mantel. She thought about Eleanor Brennan pressing a silver ring into a small boy's hand, saying, "Keep the fire burning." until you can give it to someone who will. Hannah stepped back. She opened the door wider. She did not ask the young woman's name. She did not ask where she had come from. She did not ask why she was running. She just said this. "Come in. The fire's already lit." The young woman looked up. For the first time, her eyes were full of tears. She stepped inside, and the cabin took her in, just as it had been built to, 100 years ago, by an old woman named Eleanor Brennan, who had told her great-grandson, "Keep the fire burning." And Hannah closed the door behind them, because outside, the snow was falling harder, and somewhere down the mountain, Marcus Brennan was already making his second move, and he did not know yet that the granddaughter of Eleanor Brennan, the daughter of Everett Brennan, the girl who had grown up with nothing, was not afraid of him, not anymore. The young woman's name was Bryn Caldwell, 19 years old. She sat on the edge of the leather chair by the fire, and she did not take off her coat for the first 20 minutes, as if she did not believe yet that she was allowed to stay. Hannah did not push. Hannah made soup, tomato, from a can in the kitchen cupboard, with a slice of Margaret's bread on the side. She set the bowl on the small wooden table, pulled out a chair, said, "Eat." Bryn looked at the bowl, then at Hannah, then at the door, then at the bowl again. She sat down. She picked up the spoon. Her hand shook so hard the soup slopped over the side. Hannah pretended not to see. She turned to the fire, added another log, watched the flames lift. Behind her, she heard the small sound of a young woman finally eating. Slow at first, then faster. Then so fast, Hannah had to walk back over and gently put her hand on Bryn's wrist. "Slow," Hannah said. "You'll be sick. There's more bread." Bryn nodded. She did not look up, but a tear hit the table. Just one, then another. Hannah sat down across from her. She did not say anything. She did not ask anything. She just stayed, because that was what her father had written in the journals, over and over. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a stranger is sit with them in silence. Sometimes the kindest thing is not to ask. Bryn slept on the couch that night. Hannah covered her with 2 wool blankets and added a third when the fire began to fade. She watched her sleep for a long time from the doorway. The girl could not have been more than 5'2", skinny, a bruise just below her left ear that her hair had been hiding. Hannah saw it now, in the firelight, a yellowish purple, healing, but not new enough to forgive. Hannah turned out the lamp. She went upstairs. She lay in her father's bed. She did not sleep. She thought, "I cannot save everyone, but I can sit with this one for tonight." Bryn stayed 3 days. She did not say much. She helped wash dishes. She helped tend the fire. On the second morning, she asked Hannah a question. "Why are you doing this?" Hannah was pouring coffee. She paused. She set the pot down. She thought. Then she said, "Because someone in my family did it, a long time ago, before I was born, and I just found out about her this week." "Who?" "My great-grandmother, Eleanor." "What did she do?" Hannah sat down across from Bryn. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "In 1930, she said, during the Depression, she opened this cabin to anyone who needed it. People walked up the mountain because they had nowhere else to go. She fed them. She let them sleep here. She did not ask their names. She did not ask their stories. She just kept the fire burning." Bryn was very still. "Why did she do it?" "I don't know. I never met her." "But you're doing it too." Hannah smiled, a small one. "I guess I am." Bryn looked down at her hands. She had stopped shaking yesterday. "My father," she said quietly. She did not finish. Hannah waited. "My father is not a good man," Bryn said. "I'm sorry. He drinks, and then he, you don't have to say it. He breaks things." "Okay." My arm twice when I was 12 and when I was 16. Hannah closed her eyes. She opened them. And recently was 3 nights ago. What did you take with you? $20, a backpack, a photo of my mother. Where is your mother? She left when I was 7. Do you know where she went? No. Have you tried to find her? I would not know how. Hannah set her coffee cup down. She reached across the table. She put her hand over Bryn's hand. Then we'll start there, she said. When you're ready. Bryn did not pull her hand away. She just looked at Hannah. And then she said something that almost broke Hannah in half. Why are you being kind to me? Hannah took a breath. Because once, she said, when I was small, somebody was not kind to me. And it took me a long time to understand what that did to me. And I do not want it to take you that long to understand the opposite. Bryn nodded. She did not say thank you. She did not have to. She just held Hannah's hand. Margaret came at noon. She brought a casserole. Chicken. The smell of it filled the cabin like sunlight. She also brought a duffel bag. She set it on the floor by the door. What's that? Hannah asked. Clothes, Margaret said. From my granddaughter. She is about your friend's size. I called her last night. She drove over from Charleston this morning. She left these for you. Hannah looked at her. Margaret. What? You barely know her. I know her enough. Margaret hung up her coat, walked into the kitchen, began heating the casserole on the stove like she had been doing it her whole life. Maybe she had. Hannah watched her. She watched the way Margaret moved through this cabin, the way she opened the drawer where the wooden spoons were kept without looking, the way she knew which knob on the stove was the front left burner, the way she pulled a kitchen towel off the hook by the window and dried her hands on it without thinking. She had been here 1,000 times. Margaret, Hannah said, yes, dear. How well did you know my father? Margaret stopped drying her hands. She set the towel down. She turned. She looked at Hannah for a long moment. Then she sat down at the kitchen table. She gestured to the chair across from her. Hannah sat. I knew him for over 40 years, Margaret said. Since the year he and your great-grandmother both wintered in this cabin. He was 8 years old. I was 12. My aunt lived a mile down the ridge. I came up some weekends to help Eleanor with chores, carrying water, sweeping the porch, hauling firewood. Eleanor lived here for the last 12 years of her life. She was 87 when she died, right in that bed upstairs. Your father was there. He held her hand. Hannah stared. He was a boy. He was 16 by then, and he was the closest thing to a son she had. Eleanor had only one child, your grandmother, and your grandmother died young. So your father was raised partly by Eleanor. Up here, in this cabin, every summer, every Christmas, every spring break, until he was 19. Hannah did not know any of this. She had grown up believing her father was a stranger, a faceless man, a name on a birth certificate. But he had been a real boy. Up here, in this cabin, hauling firewood with a girl named Margaret, eating soup at this same wooden table, sleeping in the bed where his great-grandmother would die. What was he like? Hannah whispered. Margaret smiled, a slow, real smile. He was quiet, curious. He read constantly. He drew bridges in a sketchbook when he was 12. He carved things out of wood. He carved me a small wooden bird when I was 16. I still have it on my dresser at home. Hannah's throat closed. A wooden bird. A wooden doll. Of course. Of course. He carved me something once too, Hannah said. I know, Margaret said gently. He told me about it. He carved it in the garage that winter. He brought it to me to look at before he sent it to Pittsburgh. He was so proud of it. It never reached me. I know that too. Margaret reached across the table and took Hannah's hand. He suspected it never reached you, she said. He suspected for years, And then he hired a private investigator, and the man confirmed it. And your father came up here, to this kitchen, to this exact chair I'm sitting in, and he sat down, and he cried for 2 hours. Hannah could not speak. Margaret held her hand. I think he never recovered from that, she said. He understood then that every letter, every gift, every card had been stopped. That a woman who was supposed to protect children had been working against him. And that you, Hannah, you, had grown up believing you were forgotten, when in fact, you were the most remembered child in 3 states. Hannah lowered her head. She let Margaret hold her hand. She let herself feel it, all of it, for 1 whole minute. The grief, the rage, the strange, terrible love for a man who had been weak and human and afraid. And then she lifted her head, and she wiped her eyes, and she said something she had not expected to say. Margaret, yes, dear. Can you teach me to make Eleanor's bread? Margaret smiled, the biggest smile Hannah had ever seen on her. Oh, child, she said, I have been waiting 46 years for somebody to ask me that. They baked bread that afternoon. Bryn helped. She had never made bread in her life. She watched Margaret's hands. Margaret showed her how to fold the dough, how to knead it without bruising it, how to feel the moment it stopped sticking to your fingers and started feeling like a living thing. Bryn laughed for the first time when the dough rose so much it pushed the towel off the bowl. The sound was small, but it was a laugh, and Hannah heard it from across the room, and Hannah turned her face to the window so neither of them would see her crying. Because there was a teenage girl laughing in her kitchen, because there was an old woman teaching her how to bake, because the fire was burning in the hearth, because the cabin was full. For the first time in 3 years. The cabin was full. Bryn stayed 2 more weeks. In the second week, she helped Hannah call a women's shelter in Charleston. They found a counselor. They found a temporary placement. They found a way forward. Bryn did not stay forever. She left on a Monday morning. She hugged Hannah at the door. She said, I do not know how to thank you. Hannah said, you do not have to thank me. You have to keep the fire burning. That is how you thank me. When somebody knocks on your door someday, you let them in. Bryn nodded. She wiped her eyes. She walked down the porch steps. She got into Margaret's son's car. He had volunteered to drive her to Charleston. She rolled down the window. She waved. She drove away. Hannah stood on the porch. She watched the car disappear down the logging road. She did not feel sad. She felt full. That was a new feeling. She did not know what to do with it, so she just stood there, in the cold, and she felt it. Others came. Word moved through the small towns of those mountains the way water moves through rocks, quietly, steadily, around obstacles, through cracks, finding its way. A young mother with a 6-month-old baby. Her husband had lost his job. They had been sleeping in their car for 2 weeks. She stayed 4 nights. Hannah helped her find a church program in Asheville. An older man whose wife had just died. He was lost. He was not eating. He stayed 3 nights. Margaret cooked. Hannah listened. He left with a phone number for a grief counselor and a loaf of fresh bread. A 16-year-old boy with a black eye. He stayed 1 night. He left at dawn with a paper bag of food and an address Hannah had written down for him. A teacher in Cedar Creek who took in foster boys. Hannah did not turn anyone away. She did not ask names unless they offered them. She did not ask stories unless they wanted to tell them. She just kept the fire burning. She did exactly what Eleanor had done, exactly what her father had wanted, exactly what she had been born to do, and she had not known. Until now. Garrett came back on the 3rd Friday, alone, in a different car, not the polished SUV from the will reading, a beat-up Toyota with a dented bumper. Hannah was on the porch when he pulled in. She watched him climb out. He did not walk toward the house at first. He stood by his car, hands in his pockets, looking at the cabin like he had never seen it, like he had only ever heard about it, which was probably true. He finally walked up. He did not climb the steps. He stood at the bottom. He looked up at her. Hannah. Garrett. I'm by myself. I see that. Marcus does not know I came. Okay. He swallowed. Can I sit? She nodded. He climbed the steps. He sat on the top step. He did not look at her. He looked out at the snow. He did not speak for a long time. She did not push. Finally. I owe you an apology. I do not know how to begin. She sat down beside him, 2 feet between them. Then don't begin, she said. Just give it to me. He let out a slow breath. His hands were shaking. She noticed. He noticed her noticing. He folded his hands together to make them stop. I was 18, he said. Mother found a stack of letters in Dad's office, from him to you. She had me burn them, in the fireplace at the Boston house. I stood there. I watched them burn. I was 18, and I let her. Hannah did not say anything. I did not burn all of them, Garrett said. He looked at her now, really looked at her. His eyes were wet. I kept 6. 6. I hid them in the lining of an old jacket in my closet. I do not know why I did it. I was scared of her. But I kept 6. I have been carrying them around with me for 17 years. From college, from law school, to every apartment I ever lived in, to every house. They are in a metal box at the back of my closet. They have been there for 17 years. He reached into his coat. He pulled out a stack of envelopes, tied with a piece of string, yellow with age. He held them out to her. I should have given them to you years ago, he said. I did not know how. I am sorry. Hannah took the letters. Her hands were steady. She did not know why. She had thought she would shake. She did not. She held the letters, 6 envelopes, each one addressed to my daughter, in her father's hand. Thank you, she whispered. Garrett looked down at his hands. I do not know how to be your brother, he said. I do not even know how to be a person. I just know. I did not want her to win one more time. Hannah looked at him, really looked, for the first time. His eyes were not Marcus's eyes. They were softer, more tired. He had spent his whole life in his older brother's shadow, and in his mother's grip, and in his father's silence. He was 35 years old, and he looked like a man who had not slept well in a decade. Garrett, she said. Yes. How did you know about the cabin? What do you mean? You offered me 80,000 for it, then 100. Why? He looked at her. He did not blink. Because Marcus told me there was something here. He did not say what. He just said it was worth a great deal more than the land, and that he had been searching for it for years, and he was certain it was here, and he wanted you to sell it before you found it. What is it? I don't know. You don't know. I do not, Hannah. I swear, he has not told me. He doesn't trust me anymore, because he knows I kept the letters. She studied his face. He was telling the truth. She felt it. She did not know if she trusted him yet, but she knew he was telling the truth. Will you sit with me a while, she said. He nodded. He did not get up. They sat there, on the porch, for nearly an hour. The snow began to fall again, light, soft, almost like an apology from the sky itself. When the light started to fade, Garrett stood. I should go, he said. Will you come back? Do you want me to? She thought about it. She thought about it for one whole heartbeat. Then, yes, I want you to come back. He nodded. He walked to his car. He stopped halfway. He turned around. Hannah. Yes. There's something I want to tell you about Marcus before you read those letters. She waited. He took a breath. He's not like me. He grew up under her thumb harder than I did. He was the firstborn. She made him into something. I do not know how to explain it, but I do not think he is past saving. I think, I think a part of him has been trying to get away from her for a long time. He just doesn't know how. Hannah held the letters tighter. Why are you telling me this? Because, Garrett's voice was quiet, because if a letter comes from him someday, I want you to know that he is not all the way gone. She nodded slowly. Okay. He got in his car. He drove away. She held the bundle of letters against her chest. She walked back into the cabin. She sat by the fire. She untied the string. She opened the first letter. She read. She read all 6. They were the letters she had already imagined. Birthdays, a first day of school she did not remember. A Christmas morning she had spent sitting by a window waiting for something that never came. Her father had been there, in all of those moments. From across a parking lot, from across a street, from the cab of a truck idling at the curb. He had been there. He had just been too afraid to cross. She set the letters down. She did not cry. She had passed the crying part of this story. She got up, she added a log to the fire, she made tea, and just as she was sitting back down, she heard a car. She walked to the window. It was Theodore Ainsley, the attorney, her father's old white mustached attorney. He climbed out of a sedan in a long black coat, hat pulled low against the snow, a leather briefcase in his hand. He walked carefully up the path. She opened the door before he could knock. Mr. Ainsley, Miss Brennan, what are you doing here? He climbed onto the porch. He stamped the snow off his boots. I told you, he said, 3 weeks after his death. He asked me to bring you something. I do not deliver this kind of thing by mail. I drove down myself. He reached into the briefcase. He pulled out a single envelope, cream-colored, sealed with red wax, marked with that same small flame. This was always meant to be his last word to you, he said. After you had time to learn the rest, after you had time to find your way to this cabin and read what is in it. He gave it to me 8 months before he died. He told me, if she does not come to the cabin, do not send this. Burn it. But if she comes, then she will be ready. He held it out. She took it with shaking hands. She held it for a long moment. Then she invited him in. She poured him coffee. He drank it standing up. He did not stay long. He had a hotel down in town. He had a long drive back to Pittsburgh in the morning. Before he left, he paused on the porch. Hannah. Yes. Your father. Theodore Ainsley's voice was careful. He was not a strong man, but he loved you more than anything in this world. I want you to know that. I sat across from him in my office for 30 years, and in all that time, the only thing he ever asked of me was to make sure you got these envelopes. He nodded once. He walked to his car. He drove away. Hannah stood on the porch in the snow. She did not open the envelope right away. She walked back inside. She sat by the fire. She held it in her lap. It was longer than the other letters. 3 pages. She read it slowly. Dear Hannah, if you are reading this, then I have run out of time. I have run out of all of my time. I am sorry. There is something I never told you. I never told anyone, not even Walter, because I was a coward and because I did not know how to live with what I had let happen. So I locked it inside myself for 23 years. And now I am giving it to you because you deserve to know. You deserve to know everything. Hannah's hands began to tremble. Your mother is not dead. She stopped reading. She read it again. Your mother is not dead. She set the letter down. She picked it up. She kept reading. Vivian told everyone she died not long after your birth. She told the home. She told the church. She told all of our friends, and I let her, because she had threatened me, and because I was weak, and because by the time I understood what she had done, it was too late to undo, or so I told myself. Hannah pressed her hand to her mouth. Your mother, Rosalind, suffered terribly after you were born. She struggled with a deep darkness that no one in our family understood at the time. Vivian convinced me she was not well enough to care for you. She found people who agreed with her. She moved very quickly. Your mother was placed in a long-term care facility in Asheville, North Carolina, Sunrise Care. She has been there for 23 years. She is still alive. Hannah's flashlight slipped out of her hand. She did not pick it up. She read by firelight. I went to see her twice. The first time was 1995. She did not recognize me. She had been on heavy medication for 2 years. She had been told things that were not true, that you had died, that I had remarried, that her own mother had died. None of it was true, but she believed it because she had been told it every day for years. I tried to bring her home. I tried for 2 years. I hired lawyers. I filed papers. I petitioned the court. Vivian fought me. Her family fought me. They have people in places that mattered. They blocked every motion. I gave up. I am ashamed to say it, but I gave up. I have lived with the shame of it for 28 years. The shame of letting them break me. The shame of letting them break your mother. The shame of letting them break you. Rosalind is still at Sunrise. She is 60 years old. She has good days and bad days. The years have not been kind to her. The medications have not been kind to her. But she has good days. Hannah. She has days when she remembers. And on those days, she asks for her daughter. And the nurses tell her her daughter is coming. And then she forgets again. And then she asks again. I am asking you, from this letter, from beyond this letter, to go to her, before it is too late, to tell her your name, to hold her hand, to let her see you, to let her know that her daughter did not die, that her daughter grew up, that her daughter is brave and kind and strong, that her daughter is everything she could have hoped. I do not deserve to ask this of you. I know that, but I am asking because she deserves it. She is the only person in this story who did nothing wrong, and she has paid the highest price. Please, Hannah, please go. I am sorry for everything. I love you, always, always. Dad. Hannah set the letter down. She did not cry. She had passed crying. She was past crying. She stood up. She walked to the window. She looked out at the snow. She did not feel anything. She was full of nothing. Then, a small thought, small, quiet, but growing, like a flame catching dry wood. My mother is alive. My mother is alive. My mother is alive. She turned from the window. She walked to the door. She put on her coat. She picked up her keys. She did not think. She did not plan. She did not call ahead. She got in her car. She drove. Sunrise Care was a long, low building on a hill outside Asheville. It took her 6 hours to get there. She arrived just before noon the next day. She had not slept. The receptionist was a young woman in pink scrubs. I'm here to see Rosalind Brennan. The young woman blinked. I'm sorry, Rosalind does not get many visitors. I know. Are you family? Hannah swallowed. I'm her daughter. The young woman looked up. She set her pen down, slowly. Honey, she said, Rosalind's daughter passed as a baby, a long time ago. Hannah pulled out the letter. Her hands were steady. She showed the receptionist the page. The receptionist read it. Halfway through, she covered her mouth. She looked up. She looked at Hannah's face. She looked at the letter. She looked at Hannah's face again. She picked up the phone. She said, Kara, can you come to the front? I need you to take someone to room 12. Now. Yes, now. I know it is her lunch hour. Bring her anyway. She hung up. She came around the desk. She took Hannah's elbow. She walked her down a long hallway. The hallway was painted yellow. There were paintings of birds on the walls. There were residents in wheelchairs. There were nurses in scrubs. There was a woman pushing a vacuum cleaner. Hannah did not see any of it. She only saw the door at the end. Room 12. A nurse with gray hair appeared from a side hallway. She looked at Hannah. She looked at the letter still in Hannah's hand. Her eyes filled. She did not ask questions. She walked to the door. She knocked gently. She opened it. She stepped aside. Hannah walked in. The room was small. A bed, a chair, a window, a small table with a glass of water and a paperback book. A woman sat in the chair by the window. She had white hair. It was pulled back in a soft braid. She was knitting. She was wearing a pale blue sweater. Her hands were thin, but steady. Her hands moved like she had been knitting her whole life. She did not look up when Hannah came in. Hannah's legs stopped working. She stood in the doorway. She could not move. The nurse came in behind her. The nurse touched her elbow. The nurse said softly, "Rosalind, you have a visitor." The old woman looked up. Her eyes were pale blue, the color of winter mornings. She blinked. She smiled, a small, polite smile. The smile of a woman who did not know who she was looking at, but who had been raised to be kind. "Hello, dear," she said. Hannah took one step, then another. She stopped at the foot of the bed. She did not know what to say. She did not know what to say to a mother who had been told her child was gone. Then, Hannah noticed her hand, the hand that held the knitting needle. There was a silver ring on her finger, plain, a little tarnished. Hannah held out her own hand. The light caught her ring. E.B. Eleanor Brennan. Rosalind looked at the ring. She blinked. She blinked again. The knitting fell out of her hand. It fell onto the floor. The needles clicked. Rosalind's hand began to shake. She looked up at Hannah. Her eyes searched Hannah's face. She did not say anything. She just searched. The nurse held very still. Hannah held very still. Then, Rosalind's mouth opened. Slowly, she said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "You have your father's eyes." Hannah's knees gave out. She knelt in front of her mother. She took her mother's hands. She pressed them to her face. "Yes, Mama, I do." Rosalind blinked. Twice, 3 times. Something settled in her face. Something that had not settled in a long time. "They told me." Her voice trembled. They told me you were gone." "I know. They told me you were gone." "I'm not, Mama. I'm here." Rosalind began to cry, not loudly, quietly, the way a woman cries who has not been allowed to cry in 23 years. She lifted one trembling hand. She touched Hannah's cheek. She said, "You came." "Yes, you came." She did not remember everything. She would not remember everything. But she remembered enough. Her hands remembered. Her body remembered. Something inside her remembered. And Hannah closed her eyes. And she let her mother hold her face. For the first time, in 24 years, she brought her mother home. It took 6 weeks. Lawyers, doctors, transfer paperwork. A long, careful conversation with the head of Sunrise about what kind of care Rosalind would need going forward. Margaret found a visiting nurse who lived in Cedar Creek. Walter built a ramp up to the front porch. Garrett came every weekend. He helped paint a small bedroom downstairs. He fixed the back door that had been sticking for 20 years. He brought a record player his mother had owned in the 70s and a stack of old vinyl records. The first night Rosalind slept in the cabin, she fell asleep to Patsy Cline. She slept 12 hours. Margaret cried when she walked into the kitchen that morning and saw Rosalind sitting at the table. She walked over. She knelt beside her. She took Rosalind's hand. She said, "Welcome home, dear. I knew Eleanor. She would have loved you." Rosalind smiled. She did not remember Eleanor, but she nodded. She said, "Then I would have loved her too." A letter arrived a week after Hannah brought her mother home. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar. Tight, formal, sharp. She knew before she opened it. Vivian. She sat down at the kitchen table. She slid the letter out. It was short, 2 paragraphs, written on heavy cream paper. "Hannah, I will not pretend to ask for your forgiveness. I do not deserve it, and I will not insult you by asking. I am writing because I have been told you brought Rosalind home. I am writing because I had a part in what happened to her. I had a part in what happened to you. I will not explain myself in this letter. There is no explanation that would make any difference now. I only want you to know that I know what I did, and I know what it cost you, and I know what it cost her. You will not hear from me again unless you ask to. The door of my own house is the kind of door that closes once. Yours seems to be the kind that opens. I do not understand how you became that, but I am writing because the difference between us is the only good thing I have left to acknowledge. Vivian." Hannah read the letter twice. She set it down. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel pity. She did not feel anything in particular. She just felt finished. She walked to the fireplace. She did not burn the letter. She placed it on the mantel, next to the photograph of her father and Eleanor. Because that was where the story belonged now. In the past, on the mantel, where she could see it, but where it could not follow her into the rest of her life. Hannah wrote Marcus a letter. She did not send it for a month. She wrote it, tore it up, wrote it again, tore it up, wrote it again. Finally, she wrote one she did not tear up. It said this: "Marcus, I am not going to sell the cabin. I am not going to come after you. I am not going to take you to court. I am not going to ask for anything you took. You can keep all of it. I just want to live up here and take care of the people who need a place to come, and take care of our mother, whose name was Rosalind, whose name is still Rosalind, who has been alive this whole time. Did you know? I am asking, did you know? If you did not, I am sorry to tell you this way. If you did, I am sorry too, for a different reason. The door is open, if you ever want to walk through it. I am keeping the fire burning. Your sister, Hannah." She mailed it. She did not expect a reply. 3 weeks passed, then 4, then 5. She stopped expecting. She had Rosalind to care for. She had a teenage boy who showed up needing a place for 2 nights. She had a single father who had lost his job and needed help with his application paperwork. She had Margaret coming every morning. She had Garrett every weekend. She had Walter dropping off groceries. She had a life, a full life, a life she had not known was possible. It was Christmas Eve. The snow had been falling all afternoon. The fire was high in the hearth. Margaret was setting the table for dinner. Rosalind was in her chair by the window, knitting a new scarf for Bryn. Bryn was coming for Christmas. She had a job now, in Charleston, at a bookstore. She had cut her hair. Garrett was carrying in firewood. Hannah was in the kitchen. She heard tires on gravel. She wiped her hands on her apron. She walked to the window, a black sedan, polished, familiar. Marcus. Her heart did a small, terrible thing. She walked to the door. She opened it. He was standing on the bottom step, hands in his coat pockets, snow in his hair. He did not have a smirk. He did not have a smile. He looked smaller than she remembered. He looked tired. He held something in his hand, a small wooden box. "Hannah," he said. Marcus. A long silence. I read the letter. I know. I did not know. About Mom. Yes, I swear to God I did not know. I thought she had been gone since I was a boy. I have thought my stepmother was my real mother my whole life. I did not know there was another woman. I did not know. She believed him. She did not know why, but she did. Garrett told me, he said. Last month, he drove up to Boston. He brought me a copy of the last letter Dad wrote. He showed it to me. I have not been able to sleep. She did not say anything. I called Sunrise. They told me she had been moved, that her daughter took her home, that her daughter. He stopped. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. He held up the wooden box. Dad left me this, he said. I found it in his office months ago. I have not opened it. I have been carrying it around. I think it is for you. I think I was supposed to give it to you the day of the will. He climbed the steps. He stood in front of her. He held out the box. She took it. It was light, polished walnut, smooth as a river stone. She lifted the lid. Inside, a pocket watch, gold, old, engraved with 2 letters, E.B. She closed her fingers around it. She looked up at Marcus. He was crying. A grown man, 38 years old, crying on her porch. He did not wipe his face. He just let her see him. She stepped back. She opened the door wider. She said, There's cocoa on the stove. There's a chair by the fire. There's space at the table. Come in. The fire's already lit. He hesitated, just for a moment. Then he nodded. He stepped inside. He saw Rosalind in the chair by the window. His mother. The mother he had never known he had. She looked up at him. Her face was confused. But she smiled, the polite smile, the kind smile. The smile of a woman who had decided long ago to be kind to whoever walked through the door. He walked over. He knelt beside her chair. He did not say anything. She reached out. She touched his cheek. She said, Hello, dear. He nodded. He could not speak. She kept her hand on his cheek. She did not know who he was. She did not have to. She knew he was somebody's child. That was enough. That had always been enough. Hannah stood in the doorway and watched them. Her brother on his knees, her mother in her chair, the fire crackling behind them, the wind pressing against the windows, the snow falling outside. She held the pocket watch in her hand. She did not open it yet. She held it. She felt it tick against her palm, steady, patient, like a heart that had been waiting a long time to be heard. And she thought about the 8-year-old girl who had once held a wooden doll for 1 hour before it was taken away. She thought about the 16-year-old girl who had checked the mailbox for nothing. She thought about the 24-year-old woman who had placed a white rose on a stranger's casket. She thought about all of them, and she realized, for the first time in her life, she was not any of them anymore. She was something new, something her father had hoped for and never lived to see, something Eleanor Brennan had carved a path for 100 years ago, something the cabin had been waiting for. She closed her fingers around the pocket watch. She looked at the room, at Marcus on his knees beside their mother, at Garrett quietly setting another log on the fire, at Margaret at the kitchen table slicing bread, at Bryn just outside the window, walking up the path with snow in her hair and a smile on her face. She looked at all of them, and she thought, You can come, all of you who are still out there, the lost ones, the cold ones, the ones running from something, the ones who do not know yet that there is a fire burning at the top of this mountain. You can come. The fire is lit. The door is open. The bread is on the table. You are not forgotten. You are only ever waited for. She closed the door. She walked to the fire. She placed the pocket watch on the mantel, next to the photograph of her father, next to the silver ring she had set there before dinner. Next to Vivian's letter, next to a small carved wooden bird Margaret had brought up the ridge for her that morning. A bird her father had carved for a girl named Margaret in 1977. Hannah looked at the mantel, at the small collection of things, a photograph, a ring, a letter, a pocket watch, a wooden bird, a whole life, a whole family, whittled down to objects you could hold in your hands, but still here, still warm, still hers. She turned away from the mantel. She walked to her mother. She knelt beside Marcus. She took her mother's other hand. Rosalind looked at her. Rosalind smiled. The smile reached her eyes this time. She said, "I'm so glad you came home, dear." Hannah said, "I'm so glad I did too, Mama." Outside, the snow kept falling. Slow, steady, soft. The wind moved through the pines. Somewhere up the ridge, a great horned owl called once, then twice, then silent. And inside the cabin, the fire burned on, steady, warm, welcoming, the way it had burned 100 years ago when an old woman named Eleanor Brennan had first lit it. The way it had burned for 52 years while a man named Everett Brennan had kept his great-grandmother's promise. The way it would burn now, for as long as Hannah lived, and for everyone who needed to come in from the cold, because the granddaughter of Eleanor Brennan was finally home, and she would keep the fire burning for as long as she lived, and longer, through every winter still to come.